something I think a lot about these days, which I don't think we talk a lot about, which is the importance of meaningful connections. And I think even as from a business perspective, if you're trying to figure out a macro opportunity to target for your fitness business or your brand, I would bet on the very human, unmovable, unchanging need of people to connect themselves. And I'd bet on that because we live in a world where that is going. And I think in all businesses, like, think about how you can install community and you can create connection between you and your customer, but more importantly, between your customer base. That's probably also why this word community over the last 5 years in the marketing industry just came out of nowhere and is now so prevalent. No one was talking about community before 5 years ago. But I think it's connected to this macro decay of meaningful connections in our lives, the rise of social media. So I think it's just a huge business opportunity, but it's also good for the world.
We got sound? Yeah, we're good. Good. Stevie boy, my objective for the next 60 minutes is that he doesn't storm out and I've pushed him to the limits. That's the objective.
This guy is fucking crazy.
Right, whoa.
We're friends, though. So.
Without any further ado, he's Steve Bartlett, and he's the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody is listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. What the fuck does that mean? Mike?
So, what does that mean? I guess in there somewhere there's a story about marketing and psychology, and the podcast started for a few reasons. The first is because I believed in the medium, so I wanted to do something, and then the title comes from a sort of intentional juxtaposition between a CEO who's typically someone who's in power, who knows a lot of information, and what would be hidden in the depths of their diary. And so at the start of the podcast, when I recorded episode 1, which was in my bedroom at 3 a.m. in Manchester, with a mic I just bought from Apple, the little $99 mic, recording into GarageBand, as I introduced the podcast, because I knew I was going to be talking about everything from masturbation to struggles at home to deep, dark, very vulnerable thoughts, I jokingly, and as a sort of reverse psychology said, I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. And I then put it out in the world, and my 3 best friends, Ash, Logan, and Oliver, came to me and they were like, that was all right. They were like, that wasn't bad. And these are the people that will tell me if something's shit. So them saying that to me, I was like, I'm going to do another episode. And then a month later, I did another episode, and as I did the introduction, I said the same thing, and then it stuck. I've now stopped doing it.
Wise choice. Choice.
That's the story behind that, yeah. New people didn't really understand it, and I didn't want to explain it every time, but there's something in there because we all have a sonic signature, and there's a ton of research and psychology behind the power of a sonic signature to make people feel a sense of familiarity and get them into the state that you want when you're about to deliver your content or message. So, yeah. I did vote at one point. I voted with my audience whether I should get rid of that tagline or not, and 98% said not to, but yeah.
But you have now. Good. You're the Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2017, Most Influential Agency Figure 2018, Great British Entrepreneur 2018, Forbes 30 Under 30 European Media and Marketing Mogul of Tomorrow, Sunday Times best-selling author of Happy Sexy Millionaire, which is about you, I suspect, youngest ever dragon on Dragon's Den, Diary of a CEO is the most watched business podcast in Europe, launched a $100 million flight story fund to accelerate the next generation European unicorn, and you train every single day. You're not really pushing yourself, are you? And my question to you, what are you doing here today?
So there's a few things. There's a few reasons why I come and speak at things like this. I think the most important thing is, in order to understand things, you have to, as the Freinmick technique says, you have to teach them, which means I think if I was to reflect on the last 10 years of my life, the thing that's has been the greatest accelerator on my personal development has been A, keeping a diary, and B, creating content. And then I'd say C, doing things like this where I've been interviewed. I've been interviewed for the last 10 years, almost every week. So if you ask me about anything from motivation to team philosophy to innovation to how the Toyota manufacturing system beat the General Motors manufacturing system over the last 3 decades, I have an answer for it. In the same way that you go and work out and go to the gym every day, I do these kinds of things because they keep me teaching. And if you really want to understand something, you don't just read it, you then have to dissect it and be able to explain it to a 10-year-old. I'm not saying you're a 10-year-old, but this is the Feinberg technique where you take a complex idea, you're then questioned upon it, and you explain it to a 10-year-old. That is how you understand something. And if there isn't an outlet to share or to speak or to take questions, you never really understand you never really know if you understand a concept. So this for me is repetitions, it's training, and I'm really hoping that today I get to give some really specific, actionable advice on how, if you're a freelancer, building a business, building a team, want to start a podcast, want to understand some unobvious laws of marketing, want to understand how to scale a team or the philosophy, any of those things, or investing, whatever it is, I hope that's what you leave with. Very actionable things that you can go and do in your businesses. So that's why I'm here.
Good. So take away Diary of the CEO, that's the one. Need to remember that. Take away Dragon's Den. Who's Steve Bartlett? Taking those two things away. Who was Steve Bartlett?
Just a really curious individual that's just pursuing myself. And what I mean by pursuing myself is we're all very multifaceted creatures. We sometimes fall into the trap, which is a very dangerous trap, of thinking we are one thing. So we fall into the trap of thinking we're a PT. And then we orchestrate our life around that. What I've come to learn after various sort of chapters of my life is I'm many things. I love to DJ. So I've been DJing for the last year, did my first gig. I'm DJing in Marbella and Ibiza this year. I'll see you at Ocean Spray. I'm actually going there. I love music and musical theatre. So we're doing our second year of the musical tour, starting at the Palladium, going up and down the country. I love psychedelics. I spent a year working in a psychedelics business. We took that business public. I love all of these things. And my point here is that's what I'm pursuing. I'm pursuing all of these interests. Some of them I build businesses around, some of them I invest in, and some of them I do at home for fun. So I'm pursuing myself, and I'm really making sure that I maintain these kind of 5 principles of loving my work, which for me are having a sense of forward motion every day. That's something you all need. And when they ask people in their work, the Harvard Business Review did this, what are the days you love most in your professional lives? It's the days when you have progress. That's what the studies show. So I need a sense of progress. It's a subjective feeling of forward motion. I'm going somewhere. I need a sense of challenge. And we all have a different appetite for challenge. There's kind of 3 zones of comfort in all of our lives. There's our comfort zone. You don't want to spend too long there. There's the growth zone, which is maybe one step outside of that. And then there's your panic zone. You also don't really want to go there. When a challenge is too intimidating, that it causes psychological discomfort. Motivation comes from that growth zone. If you look at game psychology, if you did the same level of difficulty in a game every single day, you'd lose motivation. If the game is too difficult, if it goes from level 1 to level 75, you also lose motivation. What you need to do is go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to maintain motivation, an appetite to continue. So in my life, I need that sense of challenge, the right amount of challenge in all areas of my life. I need to be shitting myself just a little bit in everything I do. And that's what Dragon's Den was for me, like shitting myself a little bit, but the right amount of shitting myself. Where I'm not panicking and I'm not in my comfort zone where I'll lose motivation and won't be engaged, just shitting myself a little bit. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, which one shall I go for next? Being surrounded by people you love. You probably all can recall a job or a place you worked where you had challenge, you had progress and all of these things, but you're working with arseholes. It's a shit job. And the people you work with, when they even look at health outcomes, if you're working with people that are supportive, the work is better, but your health is better as well. Number 4 for me is a goal that I think is subjectively worthwhile. And for all of us, that's different. For some people, it's being a parent. For me, it was the psychedelics mission that I had when we were building that business. It's doing what I'm doing in San Francisco with Third Web. It's my marketing business, Flight Story. It's the podcast. And then the last one is forward motion. We're challenged, working with people we love. It's a goal that matters to us. I think that's it. I think those 4 things. If I maintain those 4 things in my life, professionally, then I think I'm going to be happy. So that's what I'm doing.
And what's success for you? What do you consider success?
Success is like being in that equilibrium, and it's like living a sustainable life. I made this mistake a lot in my career, specifically my early career, where I viewed life as, my friend Simon Sinek would say, as a finite game, which means that you operate in a way that's fundamentally unsustainable. So when I was building my businesses when I was younger, sacrificed everything, sacrificed friendships, sacrificed my family, sacrificed the possibility of being in a relationship, sacrificed everything in the pursuit of this goal of becoming successful. And as you'll know, what you really need is you really need to orchestrate a life that you can be consistent with over the next 30 years. You don't need the intensity, you need that consistency. And so one of the big changes in my life after reading Simon Sinek's book was I tried to design my business so that it could last for 50 years and that it wasn't just a sprint, and that's what I'm doing in my life now. How do I pursue all of those things I've described while also doing it in a sustainable way where I'm not going to have mental health challenges, I'm not going to succumb to loneliness, which is a horrific thing, and I'm going to maintain those meaningful connections. Something I think a lot about these days, which I don't think we talk a lot about, which is the importance of meaningful connections. And I think even as from a business perspective, if you're trying to figure out a macro opportunity to target for your fitness business or your brand, I would bet on the very human, unmovable, unchanging need of people to connect themselves. And I'd bet on that because we live in a world where that is going. Where if you look at the studies, rough numbers here, 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, they asked people in America how many people you've got to turn to in a time of crisis. The median answer was 6, it's now 0. Theresa May is the first prime minister to appoint a loneliness czar, which is like someone to take on the challenge of loneliness. You look at the optimization of our lives, and you order your meal on a glass screen, you live alone in 4 white walls, we're less connected to people than ever. Social media isn't connection, it's a distraction from the lack of connection. We date using a glass screen. And I think, and also if you look at the way that the working world and remote work has changed as well, and the direction of travel there, Simon Sinek said to me, I've said his name twice now, he said, connection should have been on the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People don't kill themselves because they're hungry, but they do when they're lacking connection. And that's also, as I've come to learn over the last, I'd say 3 months, the reason people listen to the Diary of a CEO, there's really 2 reasons. Number 1 is vulnerability is the door to connection. When I sit there, I sat with Alex Cooper yesterday from Call Her Daddy. She's crying her eyes out in 10 minutes. Deeply emotional conversations. Our last 6 guests, all of them cried in LA. I've just landed. All of them cried. Whether they're an expert on the brain or the heart, they all, and we were still trying to figure out how this happens, but that's the reason people listen, because they sit at home and they go, I've been through that. That's connection. They feel connected to the person. The second reason we think people listen is because we give information, but the most important thing we do is connection. Our podcast is all about connection, you being able to relate to someone. And I think in all businesses, think about how you can install community and you can create connection between you and your customer, but more importantly, between your customer base. That's probably also why this word community over the last 5 years in the marketing industry just came out of nowhere and is now so prevalent. No one was talking about community before 5 years ago, but I think it's connected to this macro decay of meaningful connections in our lives, the rise of social media. So I think it's just a huge business opportunity, but it's also good for the world.
What keeps you up at night?
Nothing really. Nothing really.
I call bullshit.
I don't know. It keeps me up at night. Nothing really. Nothing.
Okay.
I sleep very well thanks to my Whoop. #ad.
I have an aura ring. In regards to your life, your career, what's been the most stressful situation you've had to deal with?
It would be just like crisis moments in business, getting hacked, and then. It's a moment I talk about a little bit in my first book where I was on the way to work one day at 6 a.m. And there's a lesson in this for business generally. I was on the way to work one day at 6 a.m. and we're going to paintballing. It's a team building day. So everybody's meeting us at paintballing. I'm driving, I'm in my car, my business partner's in the car behind me, and we get an email pop up on my iPhone saying, I hope you didn't mean to send me that email. And I'm thinking, what the hell is that? And carry on driving, I get another one pop up from one of our clients. I pull over onto the side of the road and I look at my inbox, and between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning, what's happened is someone's hacked my business partner's email address and they've sent emails to all of our clients and our incoming investors with personalized abuse. And they've made it seem like they didn't mean to send it to them. They've made it seem like they meant to send it to my assistant and accidentally copied the person in that they were slagging off. So to the marketing director of the NBA, who was one of our clients, they criticized her age and her hair. This was one of our top clients, and they made it seem like once we take that money from her, we're going to bounce and da-da-da-da-da, she's a this and she's a that. Pretended to send it to my PA, sent it to her. You get to paintballing, you realize that every single client we have has now been hit with very targeted, specific abuse that looks like it wasn't an accident. So I pull up at paintball, I ask the whole team to get in the car, and we're going back to the office, and I'll speak to the team when we get back to the offices. And the preceding week, we lost about 70% of our clients. This was year 2 or 3, but we recovered. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people in moments of panic. And I generally learned a macro lesson about business, which is in everything you're doing, there's going to be days of unpredictable crisis. And you can't forecast it. There's nothing you can do to stop it happening. There's preventative measures, but your crisis will just be something else. It's more about knowing what to do in the moment, knowing how to behave, knowing how great leaders deal with those situations in war times. And you'll all know when something goes wrong, there's usually 3 types of people. Person 1, frozen with fear, useless. This room's on fire now, 3 people. Person 1, frozen with fear, useless. Person 2, screaming, making the fucking situation worse, like spreading the contagion of stress, which is contagious, by the way. If you Google, is stress contagious at work? It is contagious, making it worse. We're all going to die, but we're going to die with a headache. And then there's person 3, who is well aware that the room is on fire. They don't need to tell you the room is on fire. You all know the room is on fire. They're committing 100% of their energy to helping the 3 of you get out of the room. And they're calm. And those are your leaders. Those are the people you promote to the very top of your business, because the inevitability of crisis will occur, and those are the people you need to calm the room. And also, that's your highest chance of getting out of that situation. And to be fair, we got out of that situation. So that was a tough day. But there's so many of those tough days. I mean, for at least sorry, turned off the mic. For at least 12 to 18 months at the start, even making payroll was touch and go every month. I've got some crazy stories of trying to make payroll. We never missed payroll, but in those early days, I've got some incredible stories of the lengths I went to make payroll, where TLDR, it's payroll today. NatWest won't release the money. They won't give us the money to release payroll unless I get a contract signed by one of my clients. And I'm in London speaking at an event like this to an internal company like Innovation Day. So I realized that in the next 3 hours, I need one of the marketing directors of this major brand. It's like a group. I need one of them to sign a contract. And we had a $4 million contract, which one of them was going to sign for me. So over the next 3 hours after I did my talk, we went to the bar. And we had a couple of drinks. And that Adobe e-sign contract got signed, sent it in WhatsApp to Dave and the CFO, my finance director, sent it to Natalie at NatWest, and they released the funds. And I can tell you so many stories like that, where you make payroll by a couple of hours. We never missed it, but it came down to the last day over and over again too often in the early days. So,
brilliant. I forgot to say, in the case of a fire, we're not anticipating a fire drill, but the exits are at the exit. In your career, what would you define as, hey, I've made it? This is the point where I've made it.
I don't know.
Come on.
No, I don't know, because
there's got to be a point.
I don't really know how this sounds, but nothing has changed in my life over the last 10 years. I understand, I'll be honest, I understand people stop me more.
Bullshit.
No, it hasn't. If you're one of my 6, I got 6 best friends. They're the same 6 guys that have been my best friends for the last 10 years. My life is so simple, you wouldn't believe it. I'm not at the red carpets. I'm not showing up at premieres. I'm not going to any networking dinners. You will not catch me there. My life is simple. I wake up in the morning, I do my work, I go to the gym later at night, I walk my dog, come home, me and my girlfriend, then sometimes I DJ at night. That's it. And I repeat that every day. It's not that fun. Obviously, there's lots of crazy things happening with business and TV, whatever, but my life is very simple. And I think...
And you fly 50 weeks a year on aeroplanes? And
no, that was 2019. I used to fly a lot. These days, it's much, much simpler.
Where were you yesterday?
I was in LA this morning.
Okay. Where were you the day before that?
This morning, I was in Istanbul.
And then the day before that, right.
I was in LA again.
Okay. Right, 8 years ago, you didn't have a pot to piss in, right? There's going to be people in the audience that are probably the same. 8 years ago, what books were you reading? What seminars were you going? Were you in the audience of something like this?
So yes and no. I might be a shock to some people, but I don't read books. I've never really read books. I reckon over the last 10 years, if I'm being completely honest with you, completed 5. I skim. Lots of you smiling at me because you don't read books either. You just buy them like me. I will go to the sections in the books that I want to read. I'll speed them. I'll listen to audiobooks. And inspiration for me comes from everywhere. It comes from listening to a great song. It comes from going to the theatre. It comes from hearing about someone's story. I spend so long on YouTube. So I think there's just a broader point about, there's almost this like arrogance about how you get your information sometimes. Like if you're not reading a book or going to a seminar, then you're not learning. But I got kicked out of school, didn't I? But I love education. They're two different things. In school and education aren't the same thing. So when people hear I've been kicked out of school, they go, oh, you don't like education? I go, no. I spend so much time self-educating. It's the same thing with mentors. Like, who's your mentor? Like, well, fucking Google. Like, do you know what I mean? But even in the question, there's a presumption there which is not useful, that you need a mentor or you can't get there. You need an individual to walk with your hand to where you're going, or you can't get there. It almost doesn't appreciate the fact that we have, now with ChatGPT, we'll just keep that out of the conversation for a while, but Google, and we have the world's knowledge in the palm of our hands now, if we're resourceful enough to use it. Like, Google is my mentor, so, yeah.
Oh, cool. You've interviewed some impressive people on the planet. Who do you think has been the most impressive to you? That sticks out, obviously. Now, just for the record, and as I said to you when we first caught up, I think James, who's the PT bloke?
James Smith.
James Smith. I was on my tractor listening to fucking James Smith and you guys talking, and you were talking about the
well, I'll tell you
not masturbating, and I threw my phone and went, have you been married for 25 years? So
I'll tell you what I think is impressive about James Smith, and I think there's a real lesson in what James Smith does, and this is really a marketing lesson as well. The brain is like really, really good at not paying attention to wallpaper, right? So I see this. This is maybe one of the most important points. If I was to give you one simple principle for marketing, it's this: avoid wallpaper at all costs. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to give you loads of examples. When I started doing YouTube videos, at the start of everyone's YouTube video, they all say the same thing, right? They go, like and subscribe. Because your brain has heard that so many times, it no longer even registers it. Your brain is amazing at taking anything that's habitual and completely not noticing it. This is why, if you smell, you have to ask a friend. It's true, isn't it? You go, Jenny, do I smell? The reason is your brain
was one of my questions.
Has literally taken the scent. Yes. Your brain has literally taken the scent and it's excluded it. It's completely excluded it. So you can usually only smell yourself for the first about 60 seconds, then you can't smell yourself anymore. It's the same with noises. If I put a small humming sound in this room, like a really annoying sound, your brain will completely ignore the signal. And the same applies for all marketing. So at the start of my YouTube videos, when I go, this is the Diary of a CEO, hope nobody's listening, listen to yourself, keep it to yourself. Like and subscribe if you like this content. Zero efficacy, completely ineffective. When I changed it to try and beat the wallpaper filter in your brain by saying, at the start of the Diary of a CEO, 74% of you listening to this podcast don't subscribe. Okay, now I'm going to pull a couple of other levers. 74% of you don't subscribe. That's me trying to beat your wallpaper filter. If you like this podcast, right, that's a call for reciprocity, which is one of the key pillars of influence, where if you've done something for someone, they'll return the favor. They see it in psychology. Waitresses that give 1 minute turnaround and then say, for you nice people, here's another one, get a 25% increase in tips versus just giving 2. When you make people feel like you've done something for them, they want to return the favor. 74% of you don't subscribe to this podcast. The reason I'm saying 74 is it's so specific. Your brain starts to think about that. 74% of us don't subscribe. If you like this podcast, if you've ever liked an episode, can you do me a favor, which is a call to reciprocity, and hit that subscribe button? It helps this show more than you know. And the bigger the show, the bigger the guests. Again, I'm trying to put the incentive in your court by saying, if you hit that one button, your life's going to get better too, because we're going to bring in all the big guests, right? That increased our view to subscription rate by 350%. Jeez. which is not nothing when you're dealing in industries where you have compounding returns. And so we have 1.6 roughly million subscribers on YouTube now, right? We know, because we have a full-time data scientist in our team, that had I started saying that from the jump, and not 4 months ago, we would have about 7 million subscribers now, if I just said that earlier. And this is what, I am going to get to James Smith, I'm coming the long way around the houses here. With everything we do, my team are sick of me saying this phrase about this wallpaper filter. And James is an incredible example of someone who's managed to stand out in a crowded room by continually beating people's wallpaper filters. I think about this, especially when I'm making content, that first 3 to 5 seconds in any content you make is the most important 3 to 5 seconds. And in that 3 to 5 seconds, you need to do fucking something to stop people. We call it stopping their thumb in our team. So if you've seen my podcast trailers, in the first 3 to 5 seconds, you're going to see something fucking wild. Because you're steaming down that timeline and you're giving everything 2 seconds. So I need to and if you do that, we did some studies, in fact, when Hungry House were a client of mine. They did a tour of one of their, not Hungry House, Hostel World. They did a tour of one of their hostels in Barcelona using 50 Cent, right? They gave us the video asset to share across the internet and to do the sort of media allocation for. We looked at it, and the first 13 seconds were an intro with like the Hostel World logo. So we posted it. It didn't do very well. They said, why hasn't the video done well? I said, can we re-edit it for you? We took 50 Cent's face, moved it to the start of the video where he's opening up the hostel door, and then we cut to the Hostel World logo in that 10 seconds. The video went viral. And if you Google 50 Cent Hostel World video, you'll see the video talked about in lots of press publications. So that beating that wallpaper filter in the first 3 to 5 seconds of content is incredibly important. That's what James does so well. There's loads of personal trainers out there. He is the wallpaper beater. He says things that, love it or hate it, he realizes that indifference is the enemy of great marketing. Indifference is when people don't care either way. James would rather be hated than for you to be indifferent about him. Because that 80% he galvanizes by being okay with being hated, which is something else a really famous CEO once told me. She calls it the 80-20 rule. 80% of people should hate you, 20% should love you, is what he's built his career on. And I think about this all the time. I'm like, look at what you're doing on Instagram. Look at how you're showing up every day. Does it look like wallpaper? Is it vanilla? Is it what everyone else is doing? In a world where your customer is broken down on the side of the road on a motorway, it's pissing it down with rain, they've got a flat tire, their car is broken down, they're late for work, and they pull out their phone and they see the thing you've just posted on the day where they do not give a fuck about you. If you can make them care in that moment, you're going to make really great content. And I say this to my team. I've said this to my teams for 10 years. Think about the person broken down on the side of the road. It's raining. They've had an argument with their wife. They've just left the house. They're late for work. They pull out their phone because they're trying to call AA, and they see your post. What would you have to say to make them care? And another way of looking at it, which is a much more simplified way, is just like, assume nobody gives a fuck about you. Create from there. Assume they don't know how long you've worked on your idea. Assume they don't know how minty your toothpaste is. Create your content from there. And I guarantee it'll be resonant. But we don't do that because we've fucking spent 6 years making this toothpaste and we think it's so a little bit mintier than our competition. And because of that bias, we're inside the bubble. We think people will just care because of that. James knows that. James knows people don't give a fuck. So he makes you give a fuck. He creates content where you can't look away. And he beats the wallpaper filter over and over again. So that's why he is who he is.
And so of all the interviews you've had, which one sticks out, parking James to the side?
A guy called Mo Gawdat, which is episode 101. He was the head of Google X, super genius, and then his son died in a routine operation and he committed his life. He quit Google, sold all of his stuff, and committed his life to figuring out what happiness is. And he spent the last, 10 years roaming around the world with a backpack, trying to figure out what happiness is. And because he's also a business genius and he's a super smart guy, but he's also really philosophical. It was just a great conversation. One of the things he said to me, which has really always stuck with me, is this, so many things, but one of the things that I always talk about is this idea of expectations being at the very root of all of our happiness. And what I mean by that is, he said, we're happy when our expectations of how our life is supposed to be going are met. And we are unhappy when our expectations of how our life is supposed to be going are unmet. So like, yeah, you get what I'm saying. So an example I'll give, I was born in Botswana in Africa. And where I'm from, very little. Like, hot bowl of rice, I'd see my mum be very, very happy with that. If you go to Mayfair in London, a billionaire's steak not being medium rare when they asked for it will evoke visceral anger. The only thing that's happening there is unmet expectations. And I tell the story of, you said how I fly a lot. Our family didn't go on holiday other than flying here from Africa on a plane ever. And I went on holiday for the first time on a plane when I was 20 or 21 years old. And I remember getting on that plane in economy and being blown away by the fact that I was in a tin can that was going to attempt to go to Thailand. I couldn't fucking believe it. I'm looking at all the little fucking safety manuals. I'm going, oh my God, right? Fast forward 5 years. I'm flying 50 weeks a year, 2019. And I'm getting onto business class or first class, throwing my stuff up and trying to get on my laptop as quick as I can.
So just pause for a second. So your life hasn't changed much?
And I look over, and so I throw my bag up and straight onto my computer. I look over and I see a young lady and her husband, and I talked about this in maybe episode 2 of The Diary of a CEO or something, and she's in business class, and she's, oh, Dave, yeah, she's got the champagne and she's putting on the slippers. And I look over and I see the joy that I used to experience when my expectations were being exceeded by my life. The only thing that's changed is my expectations of life have changed. I'm used to it now. And at the heart of that, there's a lesson about marketing, there's a lesson about your relationships and expectation management there. There's a lesson about your employees and how if you want to make them happy, you have to make sure you're meeting or exceeding expectations. There's a lesson about your customers. At the heart of all of this is expectation management. From a personal level, I try and make sure my expectations remain fairly as low as I possibly can. And
what guest would you like to interview that you haven't yet? What one guest that you can think of?
Michelle Obama. We got very close. I think they offered us...
What do you mean close? First here at PerformX? Steve nearly shagged Michelle Obama.
I love how this guy's pretending to write. He's doing like fucking...
I'm not. I'm literally doodling.
He's drawing shapes.
I could do penises. No. I am pretending to... I'm colouring in. No, go on. You did or... Did you deny or did you shag Michelle Obama?
I did not.
Okay, right. Okay, let's move on then. No, obviously, go. You came very close to to interviewing Michelle Obama.
Yes. I think they offered us 10 minutes, and they said we could do it on 2 cameras. And one of the rules we have on the Diary of a CEO is we always do it on our set. Wow. So we've just been to LA. This is a secret, so just keep it to yourselves. We've just been to LA, but you won't know, because the set's identical to my kitchen in London. We've bought the exact same set. Every single book on the bookshelf behind me is the exact same book in the exact same order. Everything in there is we've just rebuilt it in LA. And when we did Richard Branson episode in London, we did the Richard Branson episode, we did like Gary Vaynerchuk and all of those guys. That was in New York City. Built the exact same set. We built my kitchen in New York City. This goes to a wider philosophy where we really give a fuck about everything. And like, we care, we sweat the small stuff. If you were to ask me why the Diary of a CEO has been a success in the podcasting world, or the other businesses that I'm involved in, it's purely because of that principle of like really caring more about the details than all of our competition. Really believing that 1%, those marginal gains, as we call it, which is probably the most repeated term in our offices, is the way that you create brilliant things. I've sat there with Sir David Brailsford, who's known for taking the English cycling team from obscurity and being dreadful to being the best in the world. And he's obviously the master of marginal gains. When he went to the cycling team, he didn't think about the big things they could change, because those things feel inaccessible, they're quite intimidating. His whole philosophy was, what's the smallest thing I can change? And people think, so what he's doing there is he's getting 1,000 small things and that'll equal 1,000% improvement. It's not just that. That's not the interesting point. The interesting point is what it does to the psychology of a group of people when they feel that sense of momentum. And what he describes when he spoke to me was, we came in and we thought about the pillows. Can we make the pillows a little bit softer? Can we make the water bottles a little bit bigger? Those things are the easiest to do. They create a sense of momentum in the team. And when you find enough of them, it changes the game. So our whole obsession in all of my companies, and specifically the Diary of a CEO, is absolute obsession to detail. If I tell you that when the podcast comes out, if you look at it an hour later, the thumbnail probably won't be the same. The temperature of the room when the guest arrives. When Israel Adesanya came for the podcast, The UFC Fighter, We researched the songs that get him into an emotional state. So I knew Nipsey Hussle's Double Up is a song that every time he hears it before he fights, he breaks down and he opens up. I can, on the way here, I had a conversation with our data scientist and said, is the length of the podcast positively correlated to how long people listen? He produced a model to show me that it doesn't matter. It's not about length.
That's what she said. Had to get that in
I set
there.
him up there. It's not about length, it's about the quality of the conversation. There's a weak correlation between the two metrics, but it's all of that stuff. Even multi-language audio, from maybe next week or the week after, you'll be able to listen to the Diary of a CEO in 10 languages, using my voice, using AI to translate it into 10 languages. These are just the small things. Like, the obsession to detail is for some people it's intimidating and you go, oh, but for us it's so exciting to find just a tiny little thing we can do to improve. That improvement that resulted in the 300% increase in the view to subscriber rate I told you about, that's a 10-second change. And it's the difference between having 1.5 million subscribers and 7 million. That's not nothing. That's not a 1% marginal gain. If you can do that, if you can create a philosophy in your teams where your team care more about the smallest things than everybody else, you'll be successful. If you can carry out more experiments, like the experiment I just described where I said, listen, let's try and find out if there's a correlation between does a 3-hour podcast get more watch time, or does it not really matter? Is it more about, is the conversation good? If you can carry out more experiments faster than your competition, you're going to get to the correct answer over and over again faster. And the truth is, what day is it today? No idea. March sometime? March 18th, is it? Yeah? Amazing. March 18th. No one on March 18th, 2023 has ever had the task of marketing or building the business that you are trying to build today in the current state of the world. As Google have said, the pace of change in the world is increasing so fast that you're not going to find the correct answers to marketing, to building community amongst your customer base, to how to use this platform and TikTok and ChatGTP in a book that's taken 3 years to publish. You will find it by experimenting your way to the answer, by out-failing your competition. Our whole thing in our teams is we're going to fail faster than everybody because failure is feedback, and feedback is information, and information is power. So that's the thing. Like, how do you get your people to fail faster than everybody in all facets of your business and life? That's like really this. You can tell by how excited I am by the subject matter. That's like everything to me. Is like, how do we conduct more experiments than our competition?
Yeah, good. And so where do you see Diary of the CEO going?
I don't really know. And I think this is a broader point about plans and future thinking. I think sometimes it's a little bit risky and unhelpful and not constructive to have long-term plans because you risk missing short-term opportunity. And what I've just described there when I talked about the rate of change in the world, I've been writing about it in this book that I'm writing at the moment. Google predict in about a decade's time, roughly, these are rough numbers, okay? In about a decade's time, we'll experience 40 years of change in a single year. So again, it goes back to what I just said. It's not about having the right answers. It's about having a process where you get to the right answers faster than everybody else. Because if the platforms are going to be changing at that rate, if AI is going to be coming in and there's all these applications that are going to disrupt content and personal training, and I've spent the last 12 months building a WhatsApp app where you can basically message it and say, I want a 30-minute breathwork session, or I want a 30-minute meditation. You could even use the same technology to say, I want a 20-minute PT session, and instantaneously, using my voice synchronized with AI, my voice, it will give you that whatever you're looking for instantaneously. I can show you on my phone. It works right now. So there's tremendous disruption coming. Don't try and play the game of forecasting what's going to change. Experiment your way to the correct answers just by getting your team to move fucking faster and to measure those experiments and to know, like, you know, on this point of experimentation, obviously I worked with like, there's really not many like big name brands that we didn't have the chance of working with over the last 10 years, whether it's like, you know, you name them in this country, whether it's your Apples, your Amazons, which are the big ones, or it's your Boohoo's and your Pretty Little Things and your Boohoo Mans and your ASOS's and your Simply Bees, all of them. And when I say work with, I mean like I was part of the family. When it was their birthday, I flew to Singapore. I was deep in there. And what I came to learn from being in the boardroom with CMOs and CEOs is the speed of decision matters much more than the correctness of the decision. I'm going to give you an example. 2 brands I worked with. I'm going to try and cloak their identity so none of you can figure it out, because you would fucking figure it out. There was a mother and her daughter, both part of the same brand. You'll all know the brand. Most of you are probably wearing it. and I work with both of them.
Pornhub.
Yes.
No, sorry.
I worked with both of them for about 5 years, and when I took an idea to the mother, it would take about 6 months. There'd be lots of red tape, lots of people to ask, and so it would take a long time. When I took an idea to the daughter, she would literally go get the team, come in here now. We'd have no contract, there was no fee agreed, nothing. Go get the team, come in here now. We're going to do this today. We're going to do it today. And she'd say to a team, she'd keep a really small team, which is super key, and she'd say, we're going to do this today. And we did it. We'd run the experiment. Now, if the experiment wins, great. And I can tell you experiments that won with the daughter that gained them 10 million Instagram followers. I think they have about 15 million at the moment. I can tell you one particular experiment that gave them 10 million of those Instagram followers. If the experiment fails, the great thing is that they're now on to the next experiment. On the other hand, with the mother, it would take 6 months to figure out success or failure. And I'll tell you what, a lot of the time, in those 6 months, the experiment we were going to conduct wouldn't work anymore. Jeff Bezos talks about this. You have 2 types of decision in your life and business. Type 1 decisions, where you can, if you make the decision, you can't come back through the door. And type 2 decisions, where if you make the decision and it just fucks up, you can come back through the door. Don't spend a long time dwelling on type 2 decisions. Make them as quick as you possibly can. Type 1 decisions you want to consider a little bit more. But if it's a small experiment, go through and it's a type 2 decision where it can be reversed, go through that door as fast as you possibly can with the peace of mind and with the 51% certainty that you've made the decision with the best information you have. That is what I'm all about. It's speed of decision making, increasing experiments, failing faster, and how that compounds in your favor. And to be honest, I've never said this before, but 2 years, we started the Diary of a CEO properly. We started like 4 years ago, but I wasn't doing it. But just over 2 years ago, I said, all right, I'm going to do it every week. I'm going to video it as well. And I hired a team. And within the first 6 months, we could tell by our trajectory that we would end up as number 1 in terms of downloads. Because with anything that compounds, you can see it coming. If you're just tilting the trajectory by 1%, you can see where you're going. And if you go on Social Blade and type in now on your phones, go on the future predictor and say the Diary of a CEO, where will it be in 5 years on socialblade.com, it says it's going to have 37 million subscribers on YouTube. You can check. I checked this morning. I check a lot. I'm constantly looking at the trajectory of things. It's not where I am now, it's the trajectory and the direction of travel. So that's why the 1%, the speed, and all these things matter, because that can move your trajectory just a little bit. And everyone can be in front of you, but if you have a better trajectory and it's compounding in your favor, it's just time. So,
yeah, it's not the big that eat the small, but it's the fast that eat the slow. There you go, Dave Wright.
Summarised.
Myzone. So Dragon's Den, 10 years ago, you applied to be a contestant on Dragon's Den. True or false?
Yeah, so 10 years ago to the day that I was announced as a dragon, I applied for funding, and I didn't hear back.
Wow.
I only know this because when I was announced as a dragon, someone had gone through my old YouTube vlogs and they'd stopped the video at a certain moment where you can see my screen. And on my screen, you could see a diary entry. And on the diary entry, it says, I just applied for funding from Shell Livewire, and I've applied to go on Dragon's Den. My pitch is really good, so I'm hoping to hear back. And that was 10 years to the week that I was announced as a dragon.
And how did it come around? How did the Dragon's Den come about?
Yeah, so I'd agreed to do a TV show with another channel, who I shan't name. All was signed, sealed, and delivered. Not signed, but it was all delivered. I'd spent a couple of weeks working with them on what we were going to do. It's kind of like Gordon Ramsay for business. You go into businesses, you help turn them around. And I was off on holiday. It was the 26th of August, my birthday, with my 6 best friends. And I got a call from the BBC, and the BBC said, Steve, what are you up to? And I said, I'm in Marbella. Mykonos. I'm in Mykonos.
Again, life hasn't changed much.
And they said, what are you doing TV? Like, what are you doing for work? And I said, well, I've just agreed to do this show with this other channel. They said, don't sign it. Give us till Monday, and we're going to send you a letter. And then Monday came, and they sent me a letter, and the letter basically said, if you don't sign that contract with this other channel, which is one of the 4 main channels, then you'll be a dragon next year, we promise you. So I spoke to my 6 best friends. I said, we've all got 1 vote. Should I do Dragon's Den, or should I go do this other show, which is going to be this new format? And we all voted Dragon's Den. So
how does it work? How does it work with the Wonga and all that on Dragon's Den?
Honestly, I've read so much about Dragon's Den. I've read that, things, people claiming it's fake and that we have earpieces, that it's not our money. or that it's like scripted in some way. It's just not true. I was shocked by how real it is. Can I comment on how real the money sat next to me is? What I will say is the first bill is real, but that's as far as I'm going to go. But outside of that, it's real. People walk through the doors. We've never met them before. Sometimes the pictures last for 3 hours, which again, you don't see at home, so 2 to 3 hours. And sometimes you get like, people like kick off online because they're like, you were so mean. You didn't give them a chance. I was like, I was sat there for fucking 3 hours, Janet. Like, you didn't fucking, you see it because at home it looks like we were there for 3 minutes and I'm like, I hate you, I'm out. I'm like, no, we fucking listened for 3 hours.
So on that, is Tuka Suleiman a cunt in real life? No, sorry, that wasn't the, sorry, that was my brain talking. The formal question for social things is, you seem to be more aligned with Peter Jones than Tuka Suleiman, is the question that I officially asked. So I'm clear, what you answer
honestly,
with is yours.
Is it possible for two things that appear to be contradictory to be true, that outside of the den, we all get on like a house on fire? Before I became a dragon, I met them all. They all took me to their houses and I had lunch with them. And they all said, listen, Steve, we're a team. We're a team. You've got to remember that we are a team. If you succeed, we succeed. We're a team here. But it's also true that when we're in the den, it's what you see. Like, we get annoyed at each other. We pop at each other and stuff like that. We then have to go into the green room and sit there with each other for another 7 hours and then go for dinner for 20 nights in a row. So we're like mates, but in the den sometimes, we get irked a little bit, and like I said, what you see is true. I think people also think there's like some scripting, or the like producers that go on, could you just say that against Tuka? None of that happens. The only time the producers will like interrupt is if maybe my chain is hitting my microphone, and they'll just step in and go, your chain's on your mic, and that's it. So that's the orchestration of it. Other than that, it's what you see, and there's no acting either. Like, if me and Tuka or me and another dragon have a spat, whatever, it's like, it's true. But we're also friends. You know, like your friends at home, you fucking argue with them. So,
Brilliant. Everyone here is from the fitness industry or thereabouts.
I can tell.
We have a 10 to 12% penetration rate. If you were CEO of UK Active or running the industry, how could we move that from 10 to 12% penetration to 50 to 60%? What would Stevie Boy Bartlett do?
Penetration rates.
So people that are active, geez, you've got a sick mind, you do. I tell you what, right now, I'm going to draw another penis. So people that achieve 150 minutes of exercise per week is less than 10 to 12%. How, as an industry, can we change the industry so more people are active? You train every single day.
Interesting. I think there's so many things that come to mind, so I'll just try and give you a couple. I think the most important thing when you're trying to appeal to someone is realizing that information is really not that effective, and that as humans, we're like wired to care more about emotion and stories and our fears and those kinds of things. I remember sitting with a neuroscientist and her telling me that she was going through the stats and everything about this, and she told me the story about Donald Trump and why he's so effective. And she told me this specific story about a debate that Donald Trump was at. They were talking about the vaccines that they believed caused autism in children. Now, scientifically they don't, right? These vaccines don't cause autism, but there's this conspiracy theory. The guy that started the conspiracy is actually in jail now, whatever. Anyway, Donald Trump is debating on this stage, and he's debating, I think he's called Ben Carson, who's a doctor. Now, Ben Carson delivers the information. Ben Carson goes, no, we've got the scientific stats, it doesn't give you autism. Then they pan over to Donald Trump. Donald, what would you like to say? And in typical Donald Trump fashion, Donald goes, I got a friend who had a kid, sweet little kid, and they brought a needle this big, and they gave her the vaccine. 3 weeks later, autism. And
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of the fucking question I asked.
Yeah. And Tali Sharot, who was the neuroscientist I was speaking to, knows the science. She goes, even me seeing that, I felt nervous about giving my child the vaccine. And it's because Trump, like him or hate him or whatever, he's a master at emotional storytelling. He won't tell you about the stats, facts, and figures. He'll tell you the story of one person that he met. And he'll probably lie about it, but that's what he does. And it's the same in marketing. When I went around the world for those 50 weeks a year, flying from the Ukraine to Sao Paulo to wherever, building my business, people might find it interesting to know that we never had a sales team. All those brands we worked with in all corners of the world, we did Uber's marketing across the United States and Coca-Cola across Europe. We never had a sales team. I'd go on stage, I'd walk up on stage. I wouldn't say, hi, I'm Steven Bartlett, I'm here to talk to you about marketing, da-da-da. I'd walk on stage, and I'd say this, first words out my mouth. First thing is I'd let 10 seconds of silence, because that really gets people's attention. This is exactly why you were expelled from school. You're incapable of sticking at anything you don't believe in, and you always think you know a better way. Don't call me, and don't call any of your siblings until you go back to university. And with that, my mum hung up the phone. See, I have your attention. And that would be the start of a story which would loop round, and it would talk about my business and marketing through a very fun lens, and it would focus on all the emotional parts, and then it would conclude with the last slide is me and my mum together, and I'd say, oh yeah, and me and my mum have never had a better relationship. It was a story. I didn't lead with information. Facts, stats, and figures and information. If you're making a pitch deck, take all the fucking words out of it and start it and tell it as a story. That's the most important thing, I think, if you're trying to convince groups of people. It's supported by the science that you have to tell emotional stories. Don't come with information or numbers or facts or whatever. People will be hooked by stories. They have a phenomenal way of getting past that wallpaper filter by making us feel something. And as I always said to my teams, it's like our job is to make people feel something either way. So yeah, I would say if you want to increase any stats or get public buy-in from anything, you focus on telling great stories.
Good. In this room, there are probably more entrepreneurs, PTs, running their own business, launching their own dietary program than probably any other gathering. How can these guys go from, those that are doing, how can they go from startup to scale up? What advice would you give them?
One of the big things that I think we often struggle with as entrepreneurs when we're starting out is we tend to ask the question, how, instead of who. Now, what I'm saying here is to get out of your own fucking way and to focus on the small thing that you're good at, right? Instead of asking how, so like, how do I build this website? And I'm going to mess around for the next 6 days, stumbling around on Shopify or WordPress and failing. The question should be who. And even in my life, and I had the pleasure of meeting Richard Branson and asking him a lot about this, Richard Branson is dyslexic. He also isn't very good at finances. He said on my show, he said, I was 50 years old and I was running the biggest group in Europe when someone pulled me out of a board meeting and said, Richard, you don't know the difference between net profit and gross profit, do you? And he goes, no. And so he said they drew a picture of an ocean and they put a net in it and then they put fish in the net. They go, Richard, that's your net profit. And he goes, got it. He's 50. He's running the thing about Richard, because of his dyslexia, because of his difficulties with maths and those kinds of things, he was a natural delegator. He found people, his default, his predisposition was always to find people that could do it for him and that were better than him. And that's why he built this massive group. And he still lives on his island in Necker, all these brands running themselves all around the world. It's the same when you're small. You've got to figure out what the single thing that you're exceptionally brilliant at, that only you can do. It's probably the creative piece. It's probably like your art form or whatever. And then you find people that can do all the rest. And I typically see that the blockage between going from being a startup to a scale-up is trust issues. Not trusting anyone else with your brand. And you become a bottleneck. And then you'll never grow. At some point, you kind of need to unlock that psychology and say, okay, if I do want to grow, which is a choice, you don't have to get bigger. Businesses don't always have to get bigger. Then I'm going to have to get out of my own way. And that's pretty much what I do these days, which is I start companies around my interests, and then I appoint CEOs and management teams because I'm not really a CEO. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy that part of it. I enjoy all the other parts. I enjoy the creative part. I enjoy the marketing part. I enjoy the vision part. I enjoy the philosophy part. But I don't enjoy the having hundreds and hundreds of employees and operational finance stuff. So with like Third Web and Flight Story, they all have CEOs currently. Business is doing well, and I'm doing my little area of brilliance where it's required.
Speaking of that, what is Flight Story Fund?
So there's Flight Story is two things. Flight Story is a marketing business. We now have about 100 people. This week we're going to announce we've acquired another agency, a performance agency in LA and New York. So it's a marketing group. We've acquired one agency so far, marketing business. And Flight Story Fund is a fund that's investing 2.5 to 5 million tickets in high growth, exciting companies. So we've announced our first investment last week, which was Zoe. You like it? I'm wearing my little Zoe Health thing and my glucose monitor. Zoe Health, which is an exceptional company. And I'll be announcing another investment. We've invested another $2.5 million. I'll be announcing this week. And I'll give you a clue. I'm currently wearing it. So, yeah. And it's kind of, these deals are like contra deals where I help the company. We often get a discount on the valuation. And then I'll join the company in some way. And that's what our fund is slightly different because I'm basically joining the business. Yeah.
Great. Now, the way we normally finish these interviews is that the previous guests write down a question. And I've not seen that question. This is the first time for me as well. Have you shagged Michelle Obama? Final thoughts, final comments. One question, we've already seen it today. Can you take 10 steps without some fucker trying to sell you their new business? I've just disappointed quite a few people in this room.
I don't mind. There's so many things that come with what I do, and I accept all of it. There's great things, then there's things that are less great, but I accept all of it. And I'm so passionate about businesses, and I love hearing pitches. It's to my detriment, so it comes with the territory. And if I don't want it, then don't leave the house, Steve. It's a very simple, it's the same thing. If you don't, I have a choice here. So I chose to be here. So I welcome all of your pitches. Yeah.
Let it be said that what you are bringing to the table with the interviews that you perform, the way that you treat the guests, how you are on Dragon's Den, you are an incredibly humbling, understanding, compassionate human being. I think he's terrific. Do you? Let's give him a round of applause. That's it. That's it.
Thank you. What do I want to just close on? I think what I'd close on is I just want everybody to know, no matter where you are in that journey, I just want you to know that it probably looks like a mess. It's probably really messy. There's probably a ton of uncertainty with whatever you're doing in your life or career, whatever. You're probably getting a lot of shit wrong. You're probably failing in a lot of ways, and you're probably looking out at other people's businesses and the way they're operating and thinking they have it all figured out. So am I. So am I. The only difference is, I think I expect that. I know that. I know that that's reality. I know that I'll always be looking at someone else and thinking, oh my God, they've got it all figured out. That is normal. That will stay with you regardless of where you're at in your journey. The key, I think, is to keep struggling forward, stumbling forward in a very messy, unchoreographed way. And it's crazy what happens a couple of years down the line if you have the consistency to keep struggling forward despite how inadequate sometimes you can feel. That's the most important thing. In my journey, it's full of shame and insecurity and fucking things up all over the place. But the one thing that kept me going was the one thing that worked out for me is just that I kept on going. I kept on stumbling forward. So that's what I hope for everybody here. I hope that you can be consistent in your messy stumble forward. And if you do, it's crazy what can happen. So yeah, thank you for your attention and time today. It means a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Bartlett. Well done, mate.